Trichotillomania, a psychiatric disorder which triggers people to compulsively pull out their hair, and which incidentally affects between 3 to 5% of the population, has long been considered an impulse control disorder, such as Tourette's. However, scientists at Duke University now think they may have identified a gene mutation which could be behind the disease. Joining us for a better explanation of this study and its implications is the study's author, Dr. Allison Ashley Koch, research assistant and professor at the Center for Human Genetics at Duke University Medical Center. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope people don't snicker when they hear of people pulling out their hair, because this is really a huge problem. Why does this happen?
Well, it's a psychiatric condition like many other impulse control disorders, such as compulsive shopping, compulsive gambling. It's an urge which, unfortunately, people just can't control. So we're very excited with this finding because now we can say there is a biological basis which is behind it. And I think that gives that hope to a number of patients which suffer from that condition.
So your study basically is, like you said, this is not something that is really learned. This may be something built into one's DNA that they don't really have control over.
That's absolutely true. And this is what our study showed. We found that about 5% of individuals who have trichotillomania have mutations in this particular gene. And while that seems like a small percentage, what that does is that it opens the door to let us learn a little more about the biology which is causing trichotillomania, as well as other related impulse control disorders.
Now, in your study, you looked for people kind of in families or groups, if you will. How do you know that this wasn't a learned behavior? I saw Mom always kind of plucking out her hairs, and later on this was, if you will, a learned behavior unconsciously even.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think what you need to understand is that there is such a stigma which is attached to this particular condition. It isn't something that people want to do. In fact, many people who have this condition do not come forward and seek treatment simply because there is such a stigma attached to it. So really, it is something that is beyond their control. And we're now at a point where we can say there's a biological basis to that.
And for someone viewing this that may have this, if they get checked for this gene or it's positive, how does this help them? Is there, I mean, always the point is, okay, so big deal, I have the gene. Is there going to be a gene therapy? Is there going to be a way to erase this mutation, if you will?
That's another great question. I mean, I think what we need to realize is that this just opens the door just a little bit so that we can understand a little bit about the biology which is happening. Obviously, if this affects about 5% of patients, there's about 95% of trichotillomania patients for which we really still don't understand the causes. So this just opens the door just a little bit to help us learn more about the biology. But ultimately, if we learn more about that biology, it will help us develop better treatments for individuals who suffer from trich.
For viewers watching this, I'm sure that somebody is saying, oh my God, I didn't know what I have has a name, and potential treatments. Can we just, because I think people are, not ashamed is not the right word, but probably reluctant to enter the medical system with this and tell a doctor in fear of ridicule. What are the current treatments and how can we help people with this?
So there are really two basic approaches to treating trichotillomania right now. One of them is medication. Usually those medications are SSRIs, medications which are usually used to treat anxiety, depression, also other medications which are used to treat obsessive compulsive disorder. Then the second line of treatment involves behavioral therapies, helping people learn how to cope with the urge to pull their hair and how to adapt their behaviors so that they can stop pulling their hair. And ultimately, for many individuals, what works best is a combination of those two therapies. partly medication and partly behavioral therapies.
Would it be fair to compare this to other disorders such as nail biting, and it's just a different because nail is skin and hair is skin and everything? Is this the same type of disorder?
That's another great question. So we do believe that nail biting, compulsive shopping, compulsive gambling, other types of impulse control disorders, we do believe are biologically related. But right now, we know very little about the genetics and the biology of all of those disorders. And so there's still much to be learned. But we do believe that there is a connection amongst all those different conditions.
Well, Dr. Koch, that's all the time we have for now. We really hope you succeed in your continued research, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.